How's everybody doing today? Joe Pastore with Platinum Coaching University. And today I want to share with you some core coaching competencies and skills. Now, there are a lot of skills, there are over 50, and there are 11 coaching competencies. Now, if your coaches have been out there a while, you're probably aware of all this stuff. If you're newer coaches, maybe you've never seen it, or maybe you've only seen part of it. But these are great things to have in your tool belt because you never know when you'll need them. And every good coach should really have all of these tools available to them. So first I want to start with the core coaching competencies. And basically there's 11 of those. Now, they've been developed to help you be a professional coach, developed by the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, to make sure you're doing things right and not just kind of ad hocing it or ad-libbing it. So the first competency is setting the foundation, or the first group of competencies. Now, the first one is meeting ethical guidelines and professional standards. So that should be pretty basic. I mean, everybody should know that you need to be ethical. There are certain things you shouldn't do. I'm not going to go into all the details of that, but if you don't know what you're not supposed to be doing, let me know. I'll be happy to share that with you. Now, the second foundational principle is establishing the coaching agreement. And what that is, especially if you've never been professionally trained as a coach, it's setting up the meeting. It's essentially those 5 questions you should ask a client every time you're there to make sure that you're on the same page. And of course, those questions are, what do you want to work on today? What specific goal do you want to accomplish by the end of today's session? How will we know if we've been successful by the end of the session? Why is achieving the goal important to you? And what do you believe you need to resolve to achieve this goal? So that's the coaching agreement. If this is news to you, you need to get that down. If you've been slacking off on it, make sure you do it because it sets up the meeting. It's for your benefit too. So you're on the same page, you know exactly what you're going to work on in that session, but it's still the client session. You're giving them the opportunity to say, hey, this is what I want to do today. And this is how I want to do it. Okay, next is co-creating the relationship. And there are 2 parts to this. I mean, of course, you want to establish trust and intimacy with the client, but you also want to make sure you have a coaching presence, that you're there, you're available. And the client knows that. They feel they can trust you and they want to be there with you because you're working together. Now, the next group is effective communication. Now, this comes with, there's 3 different parts to this. It's active listening, make sure you're asking those powerful questions, those empowering questions. And we'll talk more about this a little later and also in another section. But that's, of course, the greatest tool you have as a coach is asking those empowering questions. And then the last part of that is direct communication. I mean, as a coach, we want to lead clients to come up with their own answer, their own conclusion, but sometimes you have to be direct and put your cards on the table and tell them exactly what's going on. Now, the last 4 set of competencies are for facilitating learning and for actually getting results. And these would be, creating awareness, designing some kind of action plan, make sure you have some goal setting in there with the real planning, and managing the progress and the accountability. How are you going to do this by next session? How am I going to hold you accountable for it? What if you don't do it? Anyway, so those are the basic foundational principles. I'll have more on this in the resource section. I don't want to spend too much time on it or we'll be here all day. But if you have any questions, as always, feel free to question me, call me directly, send me an email. I'll be happy to share that with you. So now I want to move on to the coaching skills and also the different processes. And once again, there's over 50 of them. We'll start going through them. If it takes too long, we'll finish up another day. Anyway, so the first one is accountability, which we just mentioned. How do we help people keep the commitments that they've made? I mean, the skill, it's not about blaming someone for what they didn't do. As we know, there can sometimes be, more learning from what's not done than what is done. But to keep client on track, there are 3 main questions you want to ask them for this. And first of all, what is it they're going to do? make sure it's clear the action that's expected of them. Second, of course, by when. And third, how can I, as the coach, hold you to that? How can I help you achieve that? So a client might commit to making a phone call the following day and sending the coach an email to let them know that the call was made. It could be something as simple as that. All right, moving along, the next is the most important, and this is really two skills combined, but these are the big ones, or the major tool you should be using multiple times in every single session. And it's called, of course, acknowledging and validating. Single most important tool that a coach has. It's one of the most powerful parts of communicating that we can offer to a client. It's when we let them know that we're really listening to what they've said. We acknowledge what they've said, and we let them know that we're listening, we care about what they're saying. Acknowledging it's a deep level of mirroring back or paraphrasing what they just said. For example, the client might say something like, I keep trying and trying to get my sales percentage up, but it seems that whatever I do, I just can't bring up my numbers. As a coach, you could say, so what you're saying is that you're putting in a good effort, but you're not getting the results that you want. So in some ways you're paraphrasing, you're mirroring back what they said, but you're making it a little clearer, making sure that you understand what they said, making sure that they confirm your understanding of it. So very, very important skill. Now, some possible approaches for acknowledging things you could say, things like, so what you're saying is, or let me see if I get this, or what you're telling me is, I'm hearing you say, let me give it back to you so I make sure I've got it. In other words, so all those things along those lines. Acknowledging and validating, very important. Excuse me. One more. Anyway. All right, next. Asking permission. A coach is sometimes going to want to say something that's out of the ordinary, or it might make the client feel uncomfortable. Now, asking permission gives the power to the client and creates a more comfortable exchange. Note that questions are often in closed-ended format, as opposed to, and I'll say this, I'm sure how we should set up front, in general, your empowering question should always be open-ended, but this is a little different when you ask permission. And here's some examples. Can I tell you what I see? Would you like to hear what I think about it? Would you mind if I challenged you on that? I'd like to share something with you, if that's okay with you. This area feels like it might be important to you that we're discussing, so how would you feel about exploring it a bit? And once again, a closed-end question is something a client can answer with yes or no, as opposed to an open-end question. Open-end questions usually begin with how, why, who, things like that. But if they can answer with a yes or no, it's usually a closed-end question. So for the empowering questions, you want to stay away from those. All right, our next skill, balancing. When clients express that they're out of balance, it's usually because they feel like they've lost control or they're a victim of circumstance, without them being pulled in directions that they don't want to go. So helping a client achieve balance is a continuous process. And the process begins by helping the client understand that they're responsible for the choices they're making. So in doing so, clients are empowered to make more conscious choices. An exchange might go something like this. Client says, I spend way too much time driving back and forth to work. Well, how else would you use that time if you weren't driving? Besides the extra sleep I'd get in the morning, I'd get more work done. What kind of work? Oh, just about everything. So how might you use that travel time better? Well, I suppose I could use it better if I figured out a way not to drive at all. What information do you have about mass transit? None, really. What do you think about looking into it? Well, I guess I could work on the train, and that might allow me to work less at night and go to bed earlier. Great. So, my request for this week is for you to check out the schedules and details about mass transit. Explore that option. I can do that. First, what type of information do you think you'll need? Wait for the client to answer. Okay, how will you get it? Wait for an answer. Excellent. When exactly will you do that by? Now, sometimes balancing work is more complicated. That's a simplistic example, but it illustrates the point. I mean, a client may have an unrealistic idea of what balance is, and the coach's job would be to educate them, so to create a more accepting mindset for that client. Next is bottom lining. Sometimes the coach has to help the client get to the point of the matter. Once again, we don't have an infinite amount of time in life. So this skill is done by being brief and succinct and helping the client stay focused while moving forward. The coach understands that listening to the client's entire story is not always beneficial for either the coach or the client, especially if you're only having a half-hour session. A sample exchange might be, I left work on time to get to the gym, but then there was all this traffic. Then it started to rain, and I kept hitting red lights, and I knew I had to stop, market to pick up something to drink. Coach jumps in. What are you really trying to say here? I was 10 minutes late. What commitment do you want to make to get in at least one appointment every evening? To make sure that I get there and I get there on time. Then maybe we should look at what's distracting you. So here we kind of force them back to the point. And as a coach, once again, that's necessary because a lot of times clients just go off on these tangents, and it's not rude to interject. It depends if they're making an important point or like this, giving you all this superfluous information that it doesn't go anywhere. Right, next skill, something we've all done, but maybe we forget about it, is brainstorming. Now, brainstorming is the process in which the coach and client, they just generate as many ideas, plans, alternative actions, or solutions as possible. Now, the key here is there's no evaluating in the skill. It's just a preliminary to prioritizing the best possibilities. Let's throw an idea out there and see what we think without evaluating them. Okay, what's the first thing you can come up with for this list? Okay, what else? So once again, the big thing with brainstorming, no evaluating. You're just throwing ideas out there. All right, next is breaking resistance. Here's a quote for you. In spite of warnings, nothing much happens until the status quo becomes more painful than the change. L.J. Peter. And that's not the best quote for that, but until the pain gets to be so great, a lot of people won't make the change. And the other story that goes along with it is there's a woman sitting on the porch with her dog, and the dog is howling. And like, what's wrong with your dog? Oh, he's sitting on a nail. Like, well, why doesn't he move? Well, I guess it just doesn't hurt enough yet. And that's the point here. So sometimes we got to get in there because they don't want the pain of change or the uncertainty of change, even though they're in a bad spot. And of course, I mean, resistance is a normal part of any helper-client process. And sometimes we can learn more from what we didn't do than what we did do. It's important that the client be aware of this fact, knowing and validating this it helps to overcome the resistance. Now, there are many ways to break through resistance. Sometimes the client's just too overwhelmed with the task, or maybe they've fallen off a horse. In this case, it may be appropriate to offer smaller challenges that will create success that we can build upon. We sometimes like to say, if you fall off a horse, it's often wise to get back on a pony. Start small. So think about it. When you're talking about breaking resistance, which part of you is talking? What's holding you back? What really bothers you about doing that? What would it take to get over that hurdle? How can you break through that? Let's look at your values. Let's see what's going on here. What would it mean for you to face the fear, worry, concerns, etc.? How else can we attack this? How do you feel about that? What could be done differently? Let's create a plan of action to break through this. Is that okay? See that? Put a couple of skills together there. Now, it seems you really opened a door here that was closed. How would you feel about breaking through it? How have you overcome similar challenges in the past or in other areas of your life? Many times resistance comes as a limiting belief, and when it's exposed, you may want to ask, let me ask you about that idea. Where do you think it came from? And how is that idea working for you? Or how is it working against you? And we're going to talk a lot more about limiting beliefs. That's a whole section, but we'll come back to that later. All right, our next skill, button pushing. Coaches are always alert to their own buttons and help clients become aware and manage theirs as well. Now, the formula I'm going to give you can be taught to clients. It can also be used by the coach to manage their own buttons, by self-coaching. Now, if something's upsetting you or whomever, your client, obviously first stop, breathe. Ask, how emotionally reactive am I to the situation? What might be my button, an interpretation that caused me to be upset? What's really going on here? And if the situation comes up again, how will I handle it? When coaching a client about a button, you can ask, when this happens, what do you take it to mean about you? And what's the interpretation that you're making that's causing you to react? You can also ask, what's another interpretation? On one hand, you say this, your first interpretation. On the other hand, you said this. Which one is it? So given different ways of seeing the situation, how will you choose to view it and respond to it next time? Okay, moving on. Next skill, celebrating. We all love celebrating. Nothing like a little champagne. Anyway, celebrating is the skill of honoring someone's accomplishments. This is done for a number of reasons, and they may not appreciate what they've done. They may not realize their ability to make a decision or follow through, or just to have them take a breath and appreciate an accomplishment or a goal before they set another one. It's important to help your clients celebrate so they feel good about the process. They want to move forward. And you can help them celebrate their growth by verbally recognizing what they did or didn't do, or standing up for them when they doubt themselves or when they question their own abilities. In this case, the coach is simply offering a much-deserved pat on the back. I mean, it's that simple. This is what most people refer to as acknowledging. Acknowledging is what people say about celebrating. And here's a couple of examples. Let me think. I know you were really afraid of taking the exam, but look how you prepared yourself for it. Well, congratulations on that assignment. Now you're able to pull that off. That's incredible. 2 months without a drink. Congratulations. Go buy yourself a new tie. Okay, moving along. Next is championing. Championing is done before a task or goal is completed. It's the cheerleading of coaching. It's related to what we just talked about. It's for a specific task or goal. Championing includes bringing out the best in what clients have, faith in their own abilities. I knew you could get that done. Don't hold back. It's time to go for it. You've done it before. You can do it again. Those are a couple examples. Okay, clarifying. When we speak to someone else, we want to make sure that we know what they mean when they use a certain word or phrase. And more importantly, that they know what they mean. Both of us need to understand. We need to understand what they mean, and we need to make sure they understand what they mean. We also may want to hear them talk more about something so we're sure we understand where they're coming from. And the more information we have, the better to assist them. Now, this is one of the reasons we ask a lot of questions. The more the other person talks, the more information you have to help them. So here's a sample exchange. Really trying to have more balance in my life. What do you mean by balance? Well, I guess it means that I'm meeting everybody's needs and fulfilling all my needs. Talk to me about what it means when you say you're meeting other people's needs. It means other people's expectations. So what expectations do you believe people have for you? So it's important to, once again, clarify, make sure you both understand what each of you is saying. All right, next is clearing. There may be times when a client has something on their mind that's stopping the flow of the coaching session. The coach has to allow the client to let go of this energy in order to get the coaching session moving along. If it feels like there's something on their mind that would block the progress of the session, then the coach, could even call on a peer or friend to vent, with or without the coach. But remember that energy is either in or out. And if it's in, it's being directed toward the past. So releasing the past creates more room for growth, more room for the now. And I've said this before, we'll say it again. In general, what you're looking for in a coaching session, you're looking for energy transfers. When you see that you get on a topic and you ask the right questions and you see the client all of a sudden get all excited, that's an energy transfer. And those are the times when we get the therapeutic effect, the real benefit of coaching. So this is what we're always looking for. So clearing is very important because sometimes, once again, they've got some negative energy going on there. It's preventing them from really getting into the session or moving forward. Sometimes it's important to release that negative energy. All right, we're going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm going to introduce them briefly here. But I want to talk about coaching energy blocks. And we like to refer to this as GALE. No, not my tennis partner. But GALE stands for Gremlins, Assumptions, Interpretations, and Limiting Beliefs. And these are the 4 big blocks that people have. And a lot of times they just don't understand it. So I want to give you some questions to recognize them, some questions for dealing with them. And once again, we'll have a whole entire section on this, but at least let's get through the introduction so it's not the first time you heard it. So first, let's talk about coaching energy blocks, limiting beliefs, because that usually is the big one. A couple of questions you can ask is, how true is that belief really? Where'd you get that idea from? How has that belief affected you? How can you let that belief go? How can you put that into action immediately? So those are a couple of questions, and once again, we'll spend more time on it, but just want to give you a little taste. Okay, now, coaching energy blocks, interpretations. Now, just realizing that there are other ways to look at something lessens the power of an interpretation. Some coaching questions you could ask are, what's another way to look at that? What might be completely opposite point of view about that situation? Name 5 other possible interpretations. What would someone else, your spouse or your friend, say about what happened? A third one, assumptions. Sometimes clients have to recognize an assumption for what it is. They have to question it and consciously choose to let it go and take positive action. The main question to ask here when challenging the assumption is, just because it happened in the past, why must it happen again? That's the big one there. All right, the last one, gremlins. Now, what's a gremlin? A gremlin is that negative inner voice telling you to play small, be careful, be conservative. Oh, don't do that. So the coach has to take the power from the client's gremlin by helping the client first become aware of it, and then guiding him past the gremlin's control by bringing him out into the visibility. Now, many times, simply by recognizing the gremlin exists and perhaps naming it, it can lessen its power. And in doing so, the person discovers that the gremlin is only part of who they are. It's not their entire identity. Now, this process personalizes the gremlin, and then it depersonalizes it from the client. So here's a sample exchange. So, what you're saying is that you're not capable of doing the job the way it's required. Well, I keep trying, but I don't know. I guess I'm just not really able to think as creatively as others. What do you know about the I'm not good enough gremlin? What's that? It's the part of you believes that you are less than who you really are. You're saying it like it's someone else. Actually, you can think of it that way. and you may be able to name it. What would you like to call your gremlin? Call him Sam. Great. Now, at least one time this week, when Sam shows up, how about you tell him to take a hike? That's a little sample. Okay, we're going to move on now to creating meta plans. What is a meta plan? It's a plan that involves considering all the aspects of a situation and all aspects of life. So kind of a full picture. So the way you can think about it is who's affected by what and what's considered. How will you affect other aspects of your life or other people's lives? How will this change other people's systems or processes that are already in place? What's the cost of the plan in terms of other things that can be done if you choose to carry it out? What are the short, mid, and long-term effects of your proposal? What are the past influences of future implications for everyone involved? And what expectations or precedents will be set if the plan is carried out? Next is designing. Okay, designing is the process or the initial part of the coaching relationship with the dynamics of what, how, when, who are discussed between the coach and the client. Now, this skill involves building rapport and trust between the client and the coach, creating the best scenario for that to occur. And during this time, the coach may want to discuss, his or her personal coaching value, such as like honesty, for example, truth, things like that. Now, you may want to ask permission to share his or her observations and feelings with the client if sometimes arises. You can ask questions like, how do you learn best? How would you handle it if you don't complete the assignment? Or how should I handle it? How would you like to be coached? Passive, aggressive, somewhere in between? What should I know about you? So once again, you're designing means you're setting the ground rules for a coaching session or for coaching client in general. All right, next is detaching. The coach should not have an agenda for the client, nor does the coach desire the client to be or do anything. Oh, the bell tolls. The coach's only desire should be to help the client get what the client wants and help them be or do what they choose. So detaching is very purposeful. It prevents judgment from the coach, and it also helps the coach prevent burnout caused by being too emotional or being too much in the client's situation. To practice detachment, listen to a partner describe something emotionally charged. And as soon as you feel engaged emotionally, take a deep breath. Remind yourself that there's no right or wrong, good or bad, but that all experiences are simply experiences. Detached involvement, it's the next logical step, it's a skill that's most powerful and challenging, one of the most powerful and challenging that a coach can master, really. To be fully engaged emotionally in a situation while remaining completely non-judgmental and objective. It's a wonderful achievement. And I may digress for a moment. One of the most important things we want to do here in life to be more effective is be non-judgmental. We'll get into the 7 levels of energy if we haven't seen them yet, but the bottom levels are all about judging people, and the upper levels, the Dalai Lamas of the world, are all about non-judgment. So anytime you can move yourself up that scale from judgment to non-judgment, you're growing as a human being and you're being more effective in solutions that you see for a situation and how you deal with people. So very, very important. Back to detached involvement. Obviously, it takes a lot of practice because if you're right in there, it's tough to also feel that you have no stake. So begin by practicing detachment. Then instead of turning off any negative emotions you may feel, just observe them without any judgment. Try to center yourself. Be present with the client. Now, be careful to be self-aware, but don't project your feelings onto the client. Very important. All right, moving on to empathizing. Empathizing is connecting with another person emotionally without judging them or their situation. Empathy is different from sympathy in that when you sympathize with someone, you judge what they're feeling and you feel sorry for them. When you empathize, you share the experience by seeing the world through their eyes, but don't just judge them for their experience. So, without empathizing, you can share instead of care for them. So that's the difference, really. Now, the most advanced form of this inner skill, it's inner feeling, and it should be a profound connection with the client because of the understanding that we're all one. If the client feels this from the coach, then the relationship can be strengthened. Now, here's a sample exchange. Client says, kid on my son's soccer team got killed in a car accident. I spent all week trying to get my son to talk about it. This whole thing has me really shaken up. Gee, that's a tough situation. Your son must feel terrible. How well did your son know him? Good enough that my son was in tears most of the weekend. Wow, it's got to be quite painful to lose a friend like that. And it must be very painful for you to experience this whole thing as well. That's the thing. I wasn't sure if I was upset about the boy getting killed or about what if it were my son. I would imagine it's pretty normal for you to think about that. Sorry you had to be so upset. Yeah, thanks. Feels good to talk about it. Okay, we're going to do one more section here, and then we're going to stop. I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll finish up later. How's that? Now here, this is the big one. And once again, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I'm going to give you some samples. Empowering questions. Once again, aside from acknowledging and validating is one of your most important tools, but empowering questions includes acknowledging and validating. Empowering questions are open-ended, clarity-seeking, probing, they're challenging, thought-provoking, future-directed, solution-oriented questions that they cause a person to search for answers and new possibilities. Remember, as a coach, it's not our job to give clients answers. It's our job to open the client up so they can find their own answers. We can't solve their problems. We can only lead them, get them in the right mindset so they see the answers themselves. But it's never our job to tell a client, this is what you must do. Once again, questions, they're usually open-ended that start with what, why, or how. If they can answer with a yes or no, it is not an open-ended question. But once again, we want to open up their minds and get them to think. So that's why these types of questions are great. Okay, I'll give you a bunch of these. I'm not going to go through all of them. Once again, it's in the resource section. I think we'll give you 100 or 150 of them there. But anyway, good examples of empowering questions. What can you do about that? What about that makes it work? What other choices can you make? How can you reframe that to help you move on? What's your next step? Please remind me of how you're able to do that. What did you learn from that? What will you do next time? What works well? What's stopping you? What do you want to experience? How will you demonstrate your commitment? How would that cost you? What do you need? Why do you need to get that done? How can you find out more about that? How do you think all this is going to work out? What do you mean by that? How will you celebrate your victory? How can I help you? What do you value about that? What's your game plan? What's the benefit? How can we make it more fun? What's your backup plan? What's another way to look at that? What's the worst thing that could happen? What's the best thing that could happen? How does that sound to you? How does it look to you? If it doesn't work, what else could you do? What seems to confuse you? What scares you about that? What happens next? If you were to change that a bit, what might occur? What limiting belief could be holding you back? Where do you think your blind spot is? What are you tolerating? How did that work for you before? Why is that so interesting to you? What are you unwilling to give up? What makes you laugh? Why do you describe that as a need? When are you able to bite the bullet to get things done? What do you need to be more aware of? What do you need to do less of? What about that fits into your purpose? What part of that relates to your dream? What don't you like about that? Why do you have to think about that? What's holding you back from experiencing that? What's draining your energy away from that goal? What would it take for that to happen? If you had all the time, energy, and money in the world to achieve your goal, what would you do? That's enough of those. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to come back in a few minutes, and we'll work on evaluating, and we'll go through the rest of the skills. So grab yourself a quick bite, take a nap, take a bathroom break, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Let us continue our tour of coaching skills. So now I want to turn to evaluating. Now, a coach has to be able to evaluate whether a client is making progress or not. This way, the coach can empower, inspire, and allow the client to see their own progress. Now, it's particularly helpful when a client doesn't have a slowdown period, or actually when a client does have a slowdown period. The coach and client can evaluate the client's progress based on already established criteria between the coach and the client. Now, to establish criteria, how you know you've been successful with that? What's happened that you'd be able to say really worked for you? Give me the picture of that goal. Now, to help clients when things are slow, because invariably, if you're with the client for a long period of time, there's always going to be some periods when things do slow down. Well, you can see how you might feel that way, but I really have to congratulate you on what you've already accomplished in such a short time. And of course, you want to go ahead and list all their accomplishments, which it should be an easy task if you've kept good records. Yeah, that's normal, but let's not forget the fact that you've been able to name, whatever progress they've made. And I can remember not too long ago when maybe you cite a certain goal that was achieved, or a time when you wouldn't have been able to do something that you are able to do now. Anyway, so that's evaluating. Next is focusing. Many times a client is scattered or talking about a number of things, so that the main focus seems to kind of slip away, what you set up the call for or the meeting for. Now, the coach has to be aware of this and bring the client back to the issue at hand, keeping attention on that main idea. Now, you can do this. Here's a sample scenario. This is the client. I did what you told me to do, and it worked for a few days, but then I decided to try something different, and that worked for a few days. So now I'm thinking maybe I should do a new technique every day. Well, it depends on my mood, the mood that my boss is in. What I have to do now is to kind of figure out what kind of mood he'll be in, and then, as with the coach interjects, what specifically did you tell me you were going to do? Well, I told you I was going to center myself before I met with my boss. And exactly what happened when you did that? So that's an example of that. Next technique is called forwarding. Sometimes insight's not enough. If you don't put people into the right action, they get lost. So to coach someone, you always have to be aware of the direction in which the other person wants to move, and then you have to be able to facilitate that movement. Now, you bridge the gap from where they are to where they'd like to be. So forwarding keeps the other person moving into action. You want to ask questions or raise the issue like, when you arrive there, you will be. Now, as soon as you finish that, you will. What's the next step to get you there where you want to be? Great. Let's take that idea and run with it now. Forwarding is also called forwarding the action. This takes people to the next level. Now, don't confuse this with moving ahead, as Moving people from the past to the present is also called forwarding. And you may need to allow someone to vent or, process before they can be present. So always think here, what's the first or the next step for the client? What do they need to do less of? What about that fits their purpose? What part of this relates to their dream? What don't they like about the idea? Why do they have to think something over? What's holding you back from experiencing that? What's draining your energy away from that goal? Who in life is distracting you from achieving that? What would you like to happen? Why would you like for that to happen? If you had all the time, energy, and money to achieve the goal, what would you do? We heard that one before, so that is a good one. Okay. Next, let's look at getting buy-in. Now, when you get buy-in from someone, you're really showing them what's in it for them. So when they can emotionally connect to something they really want, they're engaged, and that energy or motivation, it shifts dramatically. And a simple way of getting buy-in is, what do you think? Or how can we make that work for you? A very effective way of getting energetic buy-in is to ask the client, what do you really want? How well is what you're doing getting you what you want? What is your current approach really costing you? If there were another way to get the benefits from what you're looking for with much less cost, would you be interested in learning about it? Getting buy-in is very, very important. This is probably up your top 5 tools that you should be using on a regular basis. Because if you go through something with the client comes up with a plan, but they never really had the buy-in, then chances are they're not going to follow through with it. Next is goal setting. And this we're going to spend an entire section on as well. So we'll just briefly go through this to kind of give you the idea. But just so you know, and there are 2 different types of goals. There are inner and outer directed. Okay. You have to be aware of which is which. And the 2 ideas do kind of go hand in hand. But you should be aware of it so you can help the client to really integrate the 2. Now, helping a client achieve a goal is a foundational idea of coaching. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. Now, there's something called, you've possibly heard of a SMART plan or even an AIM SMART plan. So I'm going to go through it with you. Even if you've never heard of either, it's a very effective way of getting things done. Now, when you want to help somebody work on a goal, you want to put together a plan. And once again, this is one of the cores of coaching. You want to help people achieve their goals. And the way they're going to do it is some systematic way. So AIM SMART is an acronym. And we'll start with the AIM. The A in AIM stands for acceptable. And that is, what is the minimum that you can do? Ideal. I is for ideal, which is the maximum you can do. And M, of course, is for middle. What's the middle? A realistic stretch. So you always want to make sure that their goals, they have a stretch goal, a realistic medium goal, and an absolute minimum goal. Now, the SMART part stands for, S is for specific, M is for measurable, A is for achievable, R is for reasonable, and T is for time oriented. So the S, specific. What exactly is the first step of any action or learning goal that's identified? M, measurable. For what you've listed in specific, and we just talked about S for specific, make sure you've qualified it and quantified it as a measure of success. The A is achievable. Is the initial step possible to achieve? Right after that, of course, is the R. Is it reasonable? How reasonable is it that you're going to do that and get it done on time? I should say, get it done at this time. And then T, of course, is time-oriented. By exactly when will you complete the first step of the goal? Not the entire goal, but just the first step. Now, also the coach is aware of the I'll be happy when I reach my goal syndrome. A client who's only concerned with achieving a specific outer goal and setting himself up for disappointment. because true success comes from within the client. The coach can help the client become more aware of the importance of the process in achieving the goal. For example, client may say, I can't wait until I reach $50,000 in sales. How will you feel then? Like I'm on top of the world. How might you feel on top of the world now? I can't. Why not? Because I'm only doing 20,000. So you choose to feel like you're on top of the world at 50,000, I guess. So consider this. If you can choose that feeling then, why not just choose it right now? That way, you can actually be more productive now because your energy is focused on the now. Never thought about it that way. So that, in a nutshell, is the Aim Smart program technique. And I will have some resources for that as well. I'll have a very simple template, and then I'll have a more complicated, detailed template in the resource section. So make sure you look for those. But Aim Smart, very, very important tool for helping client achieve goals. Moving along, next is growing. Okay, a coach is interested in how a client's developing in respect to how they see their past experiences. So a coach may ask questions that bring awareness to the client so they can live in the now. Now, you can say, that must have been quite painful for you. How can we learn from this in your next relationship? Or something like, when you did that, what statement did you make about what you believe in? Or if you were able to create a new image, what would you want people to see in you? So these are things to help the client realize the growth or the benefit of it, moving past it. Okay, next is agenda, holding the client's agenda. Every client has his or her own agenda, and it's the coach's responsibility to make sure that the agenda always gets the attention, not the coach's agenda. Now, once again, if you set up the meeting properly, you're stating right off the bat, this is what we want to work on today. This is why it's important. This is how we're going to measure it. But once again, in the course of a meeting, people tend to change gears and slip away. So we want to always bring them back to that, or have them state, okay, you know what? I don't want to work on that anymore today. Let's work on this. But don't let the client just meander. His clients may ramble about things that are mostly unrelated to their agenda. So it's up to the coach to make them focus on what they really want. Now, be careful not to quickly disregard what may seem like a story, statement, or comment that seems initially unimportant. You have to use your intuitive learning or your intuitive listening skills. You have to listen between the lines sometimes because maybe it sounds like they're going off on a tangent, but it really is relevant. So keeping to the agenda means holding clients to the bigger picture, even when their gremlins want them to play small. Now here's one. It's not just a tool for coaching, but life. Use humor. Using humor makes the coaching relationship more enjoyable because it creates a less stressful and threatening environment. We as coaches never laugh at our clients, only with them. But laughing at our own selves, it's quite all right. And sometimes it's a welcome experience for the client. And remember, laughter itself is the best medicine. Okay, attached to holding a client accountable is inquiry of assignments. The coach has to be able to respectfully inquire about what the client's been working on between sessions. You should be checking in to see if the assignment is completed and completed in the ways the client promised. And if not, why? And once again, sometimes that's more important why they didn't complete it than if they did complete it. How'd you do with the values assessment you were given in the past week? What about the 5 new people for references that we discussed? Now, when an assignment isn't completed, think about, we already talked about breaking resistance. You may have to go back and try that breaking resistance technique and figure out what's going on there. Because maybe, usually it's, I didn't have time, but oftentimes it's not really that. So we need to figure that out. Next is inspiring. Inspiring is a process where people are stimulated and lifted to a new level of creativity and energy. A coach inspires a client by seeing the absolute best in the client and it's a gift that they want to share with others. Inspiring may sound something like this: you really have a wonderful inherent power within you. Or, your positive thinking changes your entire office. The way you care about your employees creates a beautiful working environment. I think when you take your sense of humor for granted, I think you're hilarious, and I think others really enjoy that part of you. Just want to say I think you're quite remarkable. Inspiring is about seeing the greatness in clients. You tell clients what's inspiring about them, and you motivate them for a general purpose or for self-esteem or self-realization. It doesn't have to be only for a goal. Okay, next is intruding. And we talked about his cousin before. Um, it may seem rude to interrupt someone in the middle of a normal conversation, but during a coaching conversation, intruding sometimes is very appropriate. A client may be off track, and the coach has to intrude and then guide them back to the session to address the client's true agenda. And once again, here's a sample. So, how did the meeting with your coworkers go? Great, except for Bob. He kept going on about the stock market going up and down. Everybody started talking about their personal investments and the portfolio managers. And here's where you jump in. Hold on a second. First, tell me what went well. So that's intruding. It's also known as guiding. Okay, intuiting. This is all about a coach's intuition. And this is often the most effective when it comes from the coach's inner awareness. And this is where your higher coach resides. Coach should use their intuition to access their connection to the higher coach. Because the higher coach, it's the client's higher coach. They're the same. They're great at assessing information. And this way it allows the coach to connect with the higher wisdom of the client. And that's where all the answers really reside. Intuiting is a challenging skill to master, and even more challenging to use in the moment. But with training and practice, coaches can master the skill, and that's going to provide you with the greatest benefit of all. Next is listening. Now, it's almost iconic that the most important aspect of communication is not speaking, but listening. I like to tell people God gave you one mouth and two ears. That means you listen twice as much as you talk. And listening is truly at the heart of coaching. A coach listens to hear the soul story of the client. In other words, the coach understands that the client has a special song to sing and a desire to sing it. And having someone really listen to what you're saying, it's a profound experience. And this experience is the gift that makes the coaching relationship so valuable to the client. So what is the coach listening for? The coach understands that the client reveals him or herself in the conversation. So some of the things a coach should be listening for are: what are the client's values? When is the client at their best? Who is the client that they really want to be? Who's the client today? Who was the client in the past? Who is the client, really? Does the client's actions match his or her values? What are the client's needs and values? How does the client exaggerate? It always happens. What's not being said? What's the client good at? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What excites the client? What inspires the client? What depresses the client? What does the client feel good about? What does the client feel inferior about? How does the client take responsibility for their actions? When the client avoids taking action, what motivates the client? Where's the client going? Where's the client coming from? When the client wants to go, where do they want to go? When's the client happiest? When are they most challenged? How do they handle change? How fast can the client think about something? They think well on their feet. Why does the client do what they do? And what is the client afraid of? And these are just a few of the questions, but we want to get at listening for who is the client really. Now, there are different types of listening. There's subjective listening, there's objective listening, and there's even intuitive listening. All three are important. Okay. Next is making choices. The coach helps a client understand the power of making their own choices without any outside influence. Also, the coach helps the client make conscious choices without doubt, fear, worry. When a client knows that they always have a choice, even in the most difficult situations, they no longer feel like they're a victim. So this is very important to make sure the client's aware there are always choices. Sample scenario: I have to get out of this job. I hate it. I feel stuck because the money is so good. What are your options? It doesn't feel like I have any. What if I told you you could have the job you wanted in your company? What would you do? I'd move out of the group and I'd move into another department. Well, what's stopping you? Money. Yeah. Well, what's another choice you could make? Well, I could choose to be happy with the money I'm making. What else? Well, I guess I could leave the department and ask for more money in the new position. Or I suppose I could try to find another job that pays well, that I enjoy more. Remember, sometimes a client must choose the lesser of two evils, but it's still a choice. And having a choice is better than no choice. Because once again, you take away that victim syndrome. Realizing that a choice is available, it's always going to reduce the negativity. Moving clients from head to heart. Having an idea what it feels like to put your hand in the fire is much different than actually experiencing it. Similarly, there's a big difference between having an idea about what an expected reaction, response, or result might be from an action you take to actually experiencing the reaction, response, or result firsthand. The coach will challenge the client to move into the heart because that's where the experiences can really be felt and realized. Example: I told my employees that we were considering cutting the lunch break by 15 minutes in order to get out 15 minutes earlier. You would think I started a revolution. Tell me about their reaction. They complained about not having enough time to eat at their favorite restaurants. Who would care about that? It sounds as if they care. What do you think about getting out and having enough time for them to do it? What do you think about getting out and having enough time to do what you want on your lunch break? Well, they probably have their own personal Anlander sessions. It could be right about that. So, how do I help them in some way? I don't know. Maybe you need to let them vent every now and then. I guess it's great that you have friends with whom you can do that. So, how do you think your new proposal may have rubbed them the wrong way? Yeah, I guess I need to think about that a bit more. Now, in the above scenario, the coach put the client in the employee's situation, in their position, so they could feel what it must have been like to be in their shoes. The employer might or may not have anticipated the employee's reactions to the new idea, but by making it real, it helps get the employer's heart into the matter. Another simple technique to use is using metaphors. It's a good way to give the client the image or feeling of what may be going on in a very short time. You seem to be in a fog today, instead of you seem really confused. Sounds like you got about 6 oars in the water. That's a good one. My dad's personal favorite, you're burning the candle at both ends. Seems to me you got a ton of bricks on your shoulders right now. So these are always clever little pictures that sum things up quickly, and it makes it a little less personal so the client can not be on the defensive and really describe what's going on in their lives. Negotiating. Since a synergetic relationship exists and it's between the client and the coach, It's important that a coach and client work together to devise action plans for the client to do. Now, the coach needs to be flexible with the client and at the same time, keep the client moving forward toward the goal. When can you schedule some time for yourself this evening? That would be impossible. Why? Well, I've got 2 kids. They have homework, karate, chores. I have to fight with some of them to go to bed. Wow, sounds like a real challenge. What happens after they go to bed? Oh, that's when I clean up after them and plop down in front of the TV, and that's my relaxing time. Can I make a request? How about giving up 20 minutes of TV a night for this week? For what? For you. So that you can do some centering around what you really want. Oh, I'm too tired for that. Oh, right. What if I told you that after you did the session, you'd have more energy and everything else would be less stressful during the day? Ooh. Then I guess I'd probably give it a try. Great. Would you be willing to try it, say 4 times a week? How about 3? Okay, deal. We've negotiated. Observation. The coach observes the client at all levels, and there's always something profound about going beneath the outward appearance of the client. The coach observes this underlying presence of the client as well as what's happening on the outside. This is called a meta view, because much coaching is done by phone. It's important to realize that observations that can be made through active listening, objective and intuitive listening as well. To practice, ask someone to speak about something for a minute and see how many observations you can make. Another skill is planting the seed. When you plant the seed, you set an expectation that the other person can do something. And more often than not, they end up doing it because you expressed your confidence in the person's ability. And you come up with something, the thought that will linger in their mind. And whether they consciously think about it or not, a part of them will be working on a solution. Now, this is a great technique and can be used in many situations. You can use this when someone doesn't know how to answer a question or if they believe they don't know what to do in a situation. It's a wonderful way to empower people around you to come up with their own solutions instead of waiting for you to fix it for them. Planting a seed might sound something like this. I'll ask you again in a little while because I have complete faith that you're going to come up with something. When you figure that out, what will be different for you? Let them think about it. Okay, prioritizing. When we prioritize, we help the other person to decide what's really important to them now and why. There are several ways you can help people set priorities. Simply by making a list of what they need to do and then ranking the items in order of importance and urgency, the most basic. When you help someone prioritize, you can also get much deeper and work with them to explore their values and see why they're prioritizing the way they are. Digging deeper into the motivation is an essential part of the core energy coaching process. I'm frustrated because I'm bogged down with this project and I'd like to spend more time with my family. What value might you attach to this project? Well, I guess it would be financial security. And who are you doing that for? Well, actually, it is for my family. So what does that say to you? It says, I don't have to do this. I'm making a choice. Excellent. Now, how about giving yourself permission to feel good about that choice? Okay, another technique is called probing. This skill is used usually by asking certain questions to uncover what may lie beneath the surface. So why did you yell at your boss? She was nasty to me. Well, what do you mean? She seems completely unaffected by my request for a raise. She just said no. Now, why does that really bother you? Because she seemed like she didn't care. And what would that really mean to you? That I wasn't worthy. Say hello to your gremlin. You just found one. Next technique or skill is called quantum thinking. This skill is the ability to think paradoxically. Many times, creative solutions defy logic, and quantum thinking is an advanced form of thinking. It's when we think outside of the box, as the coach understands that a problem cannot exist without an answer already. The coach can explore some ideas that almost seem unrealistic, just to stretch the client to a new way of thinking. Always help them find the answer that lies within them. For example, I just can't seem to manage 2 jobs, giving my family and mother the time that they deserve. Excuse me. First clarifying, what type of mother would you be like if you think you're not? Well, I want to give them more what they really want, and I can't if I'm not at home. What do you think it is they really want? Well, I guess they want to feel loved. We'll talk about that in terms of quality or quantity. Well, it's mostly quality. So let's say you only had 10 minutes a day to be with your kids. What could you do with them to let them know how loved they really are? Now, in this case, the coach realizes that there may or may not be some outer directed work to help the client create more time at home. But the inner directed work seems to be a priority, as the client measured love by time. Now, note to this case, it's quite possible that the mother was projecting feelings of neglect from her childhood. A coach will not ask about that, but might point out a pattern if it seems to occur more often. Okay, our next technique is called reflection. When a coach asks a client to reflect on something, the coach is asking the client to become aware of something he or she did to get more from the experience. Sometimes the client might be making progress, but they're just unable to see it. So asking the client to reflect, it may help them think about their success. How are you feeling about the assignment you just completed? What thoughts do you have about last week's experience? Okay, here's another really good one. Top 10. It's called reframing. This is when a coach helps the client to see things differently by framing them in a new way, or a way that empowers the client to be more positive about what's happening. Now, either the coach or the client can do the reframing. You don't like what you're doing on the job, but think about how you're developing some valuable skills that will eventually get you to the next level. You may have lost a contract agreement, but you gain the respect of all your colleagues because of your willingness to compromise, your willingness not to compromise your values. A coach always helps their client reframe certain limiting words, such as to change in can't, to choose to, not should, to could, have to choose to, try, to will. So once again, we want to turn those negative words around to make them positive. Once again, there's something subliminal, subconscious about that. The positive words really help. So whenever you're framing, try to put something in the positive sense. Okay, now I want to demonstrate or talk about responding and reacting and contrast the two. Now, a coach should never react to what the client says, because this reaction will be mostly from the coach's perspective and past experience. Responding is focused on the now and objectively looks at each situation. Reacting. You forgot to tell the employees that you'd be out of the office for a few days. What were you thinking? Responding. Listening before answering. Sounds like your employees were not very happy about your not telling them that you'd be away for a few days. Totally different way of doing it, but same message. Okay, now I want to go to self-management. During the coaching session, the coach has to manage himself or herself, and self-management means not letting anything getting in the way of holding the clients to the agenda. There's no place in coaching relationships for judgment, opinion, or personal preference. Coaches, the reality is they have gremlins too, But through self-awareness, self-management, coaches are able to deal with their gremlins after a session. It's imperative that all coaches have their own coach to help keep them on track and deal with their own gremlins. Now, once again, if you're thinking about counter-transference, and sometimes this is what's going on here, and go back to our section on subjective listening, and I've got more in the resources where I go more into detail on that. So, next, solution focusing. A solution-focused exchange is just that. It takes energy away from the problem and focuses on the strengths that create solutions. Scenario: your client would like to improve their ability to close a sale. So, what techniques are you currently working best for you? Well, it seems that I'm better at closing the sale on the phone than I am in person. Well, why do you think that is? I guess because I'm more relaxed over the phone, and I also get to refer to my notes. So what does that tell you? I guess I should concentrate on doing more of that, at least for now, and stay away from things that I'm not comfortable with. Strategic planning. Strategic planning involves helping a client go through a 4-step process to come up with an opportunity, an action plan for a pain, a challenge, or a perceived problem. 4 steps, and you may have heard this before. First, you identify the challenge. Then you identify the ideal goal or the desired income. Then you come up with strategic strategies, possibilities, and ideas to reach the goal. And finally, you decide on a tact. The strategy that you choose to implement should be the first step in a plan to make it happen. And if there's more than one, you prioritize them. Challenge. You want to improve the sale of a certain product. Your goal? 500 sales of the product by year end. Strategy? Create a new brochure. Tactic? Make a list of all the ideas you want to cover in the brochure and then rank them in terms of importance. Okay, now we're up to stretching. A coach will help the client stretch to new limits by suggesting ways to go up a notch higher. You seem comfortable making 20 calls a day. What about setting a goal for 25 to stretch you a bit from your comfort zone? You did great now. How about we go for 3 new contacts this week? It's okay if I challenge you and we take a little risk this week. Next is summarizing. This skill recaps what you said, sort of like acknowledging, but particularly say an assignment or a session. So let me recap what happened today. And why don't we go over what you're going to do about next week? Next is thinking outside the box. Many times a client feels that a better solution just doesn't exist. They just can't see any other possibilities. So a coach helps a client discover possibilities that are perhaps not easy to see. I just can't come up with the funds to make a plan work. I've tried everything, a loan, an investor, refinancing, everything. How important is it for the plan to be exactly as you proposed it? Well, I worked on it for hours, and I think it's really good. In fact, I know it is. And I think it's impressive that you were able to come up with it. So how about thinking about using some ability to modify the plan, make a bit less costly solution? Well, I probably could rework it. The inventory numbers, they can make it balance out. Now, if that worked, how would the rest of the plan look? Well, great, I guess. It's the sales we really want. Great. Well, what will make these modifications, what will it take to get these modifications underway? So that's a sample of thinking outside the box. Next, we talked about it. Once again, we'll say it one more time, validating. We all have feelings, and many people feel guilty for having them. When we validate a person, we let them know that they have the right to feel the way they want to do. We validate emotions. Validating, it's not judging whether what someone is saying is right or wrong or agreeing with them in any way. It's just letting them know that we see things from their perspective. The value of validating is to have a person release and feel normal for having those feelings, especially in certain situations. Now, let's use this properly. When we're validating, you never say, I know how you feel, because you don't. Nobody knows how somebody feels. What you say is, it's understandable you feel that way because, and tell them why. Some possible approaches to validating are things like, you have every right to feel that way because you feel you've been hurt and you're angry. It's no wonder you feel resentful. It's perfectly normal or natural, and it can be very upsetting when something like that happens. Based on your values or your beliefs or the way you saw that, it makes sense that you feel that way. I'm really upset about that raise. Well, since you feel like you put your all into the job, I can certainly see how you would feel that way. Next are values. Values are principles that people live by, and they're the things that make them tick and drive them. Now, there are two types of values, fear-based and conscious-based. Values based on fear are the ones that you can take action to avoid something. They're the have-tos. Conscious values allow people to take positive action. It's important to help people realize if they're choosing from passion or fear, either consciously or not. Now, a coach understands how important values are to a client and may not always agree with the client for choosing his or her values, but the coach always honors a client's values and helps them live and stay true to them. Some questions to bring values to a client, or some questions to bring out the values in a client so they know, so you know, so it's clear to both of you. Think about a time when life was really good. What value is being expressed or honored? Think about a time when you were really upset. What value is being challenged? When do you compromise your values? Why? Let's take a look at what you must experience in life. Why is that so important? Values assessment tools useful to help clients clarify their values and to find out why their values are being played out in their lives. After identifying the values, it's important to list and rank them. It can be helpful. All right, we're getting near the end. Last one we're going to talk about today is visioning. Without vision, the coaching relationship will not be effective because neither the coach nor the client will know which direction to move. Thus, a coach helps a client to design a vision that's exciting, it's purposeful, it's fulfilling, and it's going to inspire the client to create it. Ultimately, the vision that the coach helps the client to see is a vision of who the client really wants to be, or what the client wants to experience. This process is much more than simply visioning outer achievements. The visioning comes from the client being able to see and feel a new me. Then, energetically, the vision is set into motion, and the coach and the client work synergistically to make it manifest itself. Sample? Well, that's really interesting. Imagine that 5 weeks from now, your idea is actually occurring. Paint a picture of what you see. Remember to include all the senses, people, and places that will be just right for the scenario to flourish. Anyway, that's our run through of the core coaching skills and foundation. Hope you enjoyed it. Once again, in the resource section, I'll have more detail on all of this. Have any questions, always feel free to email me, or in our individual sessions, we can talk about it. So I hope that was beneficial. I hope you learned some that you didn't know. I hope there was some that you remembered, oh, wow, I haven't been using this. And if you implement all this stuff, you will be a much better coach. You will have more satisfied clients, and ultimately that's going to lead you to more clients. So anyway, until next time, make it a great day.